I always have to giggle when there's a reading that ends kind of dark, and we say the word of the Lord, and thanks be to God. So there's Job, right? I shall not know happiness again, the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God that we'll never know happiness again. Job, of course, is the Jewish attempt to understand theodicy, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? I wrote a world religion curriculum at my last school, and one of the things I asked students to look at as we went through sort of the major religions was watch that question and see the answer that some come up with and see the insights that others drive toward. But in reality, no one's answered it. And in fact, those groups that approach it from an answer standpoint, it's very unfulfilling. And my students got a little nasty about it. You know, if an adherent of that faith would come and go, oh, it's just this simple. But it isn't that simple, is it? The first truth of life, which I've said to you before, is life is hard. That's the first truth of life. And it doesn't matter what religion you believe, or if you don't believe any at all. Doesn't matter where you live, what your zip code, your income, your language. None of it matters. The first truth of life is that life is hard. And so the whole story of Job is the Jewish attempt to go, if we're the chosen people of God, what the heck? Why isn't it just straight blessing? And so this story lays it out, right? I mean, Job's story is insane. And here we have him at sort of I was going to say the height of his despair, but the depth of his despair. He's just like, what? Where's it? How could this ever get any better? And you hear something similar out of the apostles in that gospel, believe it or not. There's a doom sense there that he was doing all these awesome things initially, which addresses the why are bad things happening to good people. I would imagine most of the people in that town were good people. And so as they fill the house with their need, and he kind of meets it in the short term. Notice it doesn't say everyone was healed. Many, it says. Again, don't understand why. There's all the mystery of that stuff. But their doom and drudgery, when they wake up and realize he's gone. How could he leave? There's more to do here. This may take a second to get to, but I've been struck by how much in the last, I don't know how many years, but recently we'll say, that people have taken what I would otherwise call virtuous words or things that were designed to be good and put the word toxic in front of them and then move on. So whether it's toxic positivity or toxic forgiveness, I've preached on that before recently, toxic masculinity, people just throw that word out front and then done. Because this is difficult, and this is the thing that bothers me. There is always a critique of forgiveness maybe that's given too quickly or something, or that you can't just always be happy all the time, which is what I think some people mean when they say toxic positivity or toxic optimism. And there certainly are people that are advancing a form of masculinity that is destructive and not helpful. But the difficult work is then working on the virtues and the good things to return them to where they're supposed to be. Not to just keep pointing out what you think is wrong. That's toxic. The irony of it all. Well, that's just toxic optimism. I don't have to participate. I'll tell you what I'm sick of, and it's this ism. It's the ism of cynicism masked as intellectualism. Where people just go, well, I'm just pointing out the obvious. That's what's true. Again, it's always good to grow. It's always good to critique. Our faith should be questioned and challenged so that we grow deeper in faith, not become toxic, not to become people who are just filled with. Ultimately, what underpins all that is the worry and the anxiety of it. Where are we going? What's happening? The world's getting darker. Well, the work here is in not letting that win. The anxiety, the doom of it. And again, I've said this before, but it's always worth repeating. What is anxiety to us? As Francis de Sales said, it's the greatest evil that can befall your soul except for sin, because what it robs you of is your confidence in God. And as I said, the demons, the devils, they don't need you to sin. They just need you to stop focusing on the good. To not be focused on the goodness of God, but to look at what's happening in front of us in our world and then get upset about it. Again, there's a value in saying what is going on and how are we going to work on it and correct it. But there's a reason we've created a word in the dictionary called doom scrolling. Because there's a part of us that just sit there, oh God, oh geez, oh what's he got to say about that? Oh good Lord, oh, click, click, rabbit hole down. And pretty soon what we're filled with is nothing good. We're just sitting there drinking the toxicity and the anxiety and going, can you believe how toxic things are? Who are we kidding? And I preach this is something that I need to work on as much as anybody. And again, I've used this example before, but it bears repeating. About noise-canceling headphones. For years, I just assumed there was a little goblin in those that, canceled out the noise. But it turns out not true. Turns out there's a whole science behind it. And it is simply that there's that speaker in the headphone that's grabbing what's going on out there, and then it's flipping that sound 180 degrees, frequency modulation. My trigonometry teacher would be proud of me. And it puts it 180 degrees out of phase. That's what it's doing. It's canceling it out. And so I ask you, are you wearing anxiety-canceling headphones or anxiety-amplifying headphones? What am I doing? What are you doing? This is the difficult work, but we've got to find the goodness. Because if all we ever do is work on what we think is wrong or what's got us upset, it does change who we are. When I worked at the Children's Hospital in Toronto, my direct boss was a Jewish nurse practitioner. Love her dearly. Ann Gold, if by chance you're watching, love you. But Ann said to me the first day I started there, hey, particularly because you're a celibate, you need to make sure you hang out with healthy children, because I know there aren't any in your house, but you need to hang out with healthy children, or you're going to start to think that every kid is sick. Because you're working 10 to 12 hours a day in here, and every kid in here is sick, and most are dragging along an IV pole. And I thought she was crazy, but it didn't take 2 or 3 weeks to realize that if I met a kid at the parish, I'd be like, what's wrong with him? Like, just on some deeper level. We simply do what we are immersed in. There's a guy on Instagram, his name is Jacob Simon, and his account is Jacob Simon Says. And all he does is every day say, today, or for the first time ever, today is February 1st of 2024. And he gives you all these good things that are going on. Most of his focus is of an environmental nature, but they always have to do with who we are. And he says at the very end, it's always his caption, it's my goal to replace dread with hope. It's my goal to replace dread with hope. And one of them that showed up on the February 1st story was this, that studies are showing that when someone shares about their mental health recovery, those who engage with that person are experiencing higher levels of a sense of themselves and engagement with others. That there's a healthiness that comes from simply listening to someone else share their story. And that is just a social media version of the deeper theological truth, which is change your focus from worry to the goodness of God and then sacrifice. Let me say it again. Change your focus from worry to the goodness of God and sacrifice. It's the last piece that often gets left. Otherwise, we just leave it in our head. Less worry, more goodness. But it's got to get lived out. That's why Jesus, oh boy, right? This is why God comes to earth. God could have saved us just like that. He comes to earth to address some of that mystery of why bad things happen to good people. We have to live some of it out. Move from worry to the goodness of God and sacrifice. Let's try it. We're going to move from to the and I'm done. No, one last thought. One last thought. I always want to connect what I'm saying to what happens here. This is a beautiful and pretty altar, but in the reality of it, right, altars were bloody. It's where things got sacrificed. So Jesus' whole life was saying, let me move you from worry to the goodness of God, and then I'm going to sacrifice. And the very presence that we receive today is going to try to change us at the molecular level to believe that more deeply. There's a lot that's wrong and sad and confounding in our world and in our church. But if all we do is doom scroll, if all we do is listen to more and more voices that are telling us the same things, we're aware of what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is to let worry set aside. That isn't toxic optimism. On the contrary, right? Last thought. I'm sorry, I could get all wound up on this. St. Paul said this in Romans, and Aiden Hutchinson stole it from me. I saw it on Instagram, but it's mine. Okay, it's St. Paul's. Not only that, we boast in our suffering, because suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint. That, brothers and sisters, is not toxic positivity. That's the power that ended sin and death for all time, because God entered into our life to do that. That's not toxic. That's the same gift that we'll receive in this Eucharist. Maybe that's too much. I don't know. What I do know is if we don't start working on that, the difficult work of letting go of all the things that just wind us up more, and we don't start engaging with the goodness of God and the opportunities we have to share that, then we just become prophets of doom. We just become more instruments of doom. And what we want to be are instruments of peace and love and mercy to change the focus from worry to the goodness of God and sacrifice. He's coming from this altar to you and me in just a few minutes to tell us that. No, not tell us that. Show us that, so that when we go out of here today, it's a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more helpful, and hopefully a little less anxious. May God be praised.